All right, we got some preliminary credentials going on here in the trial, so that is no better time than to bring on our very own Law and Crime host, Vincent Hill. Vincent, how are you? He's our law enforcement analyst. Welcome.
Hey, Bob, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I like that backdrop you got there, Vincent. So, hey, listen, we got this guy, Grant Fredericks. He's a forensic video analyst has done some enhancement of videotape. And, Vincent, nobody knows better than a guy like you and me as a prosecutor the value of enhanced video in a courtroom. I think it's going to be pretty compelling. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you have video evidence of a crime, in this case, the shooting of a 15-year-old, this officer is on trial for murder, then that's going to be very telling. You know, the original video is kind of grainy, but anytime you can enhance that and get every aspect of that video can be very telling for either the defense or the prosecution in this case. So I'm really curious to see how this video was enhanced and what they come up with here, Bob.
Yeah, and, you know, the power of that videotaped evidence, it's so demonstrable, it's so impactful as opposed to testimony. And I've always been amazed at what the forensic specialists can do to enhance both audio and the visual shots and bring out things that the naked eye would not have originally seen here, Vincent. So I think that the prosecution is going to have a pretty good day with this kind of testimony. We can see a little bit of it now. I don't know if you can, of the officer actually running out onto the scene. And this is the video that we expect, Vincent, is going to be enhanced.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one thing I want to point out, Bob, and I can see it there on the screen, is a lot of people assume they watch too much TV, that body cam footage is just this crystal clear image that you would get like if you were recording something on your iPhone or something like that. It's not that's the case here, because you have to keep in mind the officer's running, he's chasing someone, there's a lot of movement. So that's why you need this enhancement of this video so you can actually get a clear idea of what happened.
You know, Vincent, when I was prosecutor, the body cams came into fashion, and there was a lot of pushback by the police, and you probably can speak to this better than I can, about using them. But in fact, I would say over 95% of the cases, the body cams were actually exonerating the police and showing proper police conduct. But of course, when you have a case like this, it could go against the cop.
Well, absolutely, Bob. And here's the thing. A lot of police officers did not want body cam, not because they were out doing something wrong, because they assumed it would infringe on their personal times when they're being a police officer, like going to the bathroom or talking to the wives on the phone. Once they realized that wasn't the case, they accepted it. And that, to your point, a lot of times, 95, 96, 98% of the time, it actually clears the officer to show that they were acting in policy. And, you know, that's the important thing here. Was this officer acting in policy? If he was, then we know what the outcome will be. If he wasn't, then we know what the outcome will be.
Well, Vincent Hill, law enforcement expert, host at Law and Crime Network. You can't get better trials than what we pick here at the Law and Crime Network. Dan Abrams production. Let's get into court. Welcome back. Listen, I'm with Vincent Hill, and you got a prosecutor here, you got a cop guy here, and we have an expert on the stand, Vincent, who's given a little bit of dry testimony. So our producers said, what would be more scintillating, listening to this dry testimony or listening to guys like me and you? So here we are.
That's right.
Real quick, you know, Vincent, one thing that I've always loved about experts, and there's a whole way that you examine them in a direct examination, and cross-examination is much different than a fact witness. But what I've always loved about them in the complex trials I've had is you learn so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn so much. We just heard this testimony from this guy here. A lot of that stuff was very technical. He was using words and terms I've never heard. Listen, I know how to strap on a body cam. I know how to turn it on when I get out of my patrol car. But those terms he was using are way above my head. But the jury actually needs to hear this so they can actually get a better understanding of how he enhanced this video, what his actual role is in this case. So although it may be dry testimony, it's very important testimony, Bob.
Right, yeah, and qualifying your expert is key, so our viewers know and our great chatters on the Law and Crime Network, because you want to get the best, most qualified expert, somebody whose credentials are unassailable. So this part of it, while dry, is absolutely necessary to the credibility of the expert.
That's right. And of course, you know, once the defense takes the stand, they're going to try to discredit this guy. That's why his background, how long he's been doing this types of things, how many times he has actually done it, will all come into play here once the defense tries to discredit him.
Right. All right, listen, we got Vincent Hill. He's out there. I don't know. There's a lot of activity going on there. Thank you for being here. We're at the Roy Oliver trial. There's experts on the stand. Hey, it's the Law and Crime Network, gavel to gavel coverage. Get online. Tell your family and friends. Get into that chat room. We'd love to be able to see what you have to say. We'll be back after the break. All right, we're in the Roy Oliver case. This is the expert witness who's talking about the enhancement of the video footage. I think we probably can hear the trial going on at the same time that I'm speaking, but nevertheless, let's even make it more complicated with Vincent Hill out there. I know it's a little hot down there in Hotlanta. Absolutely. Hey, Vincent, you know, the producers want us to talk a little bit about, I had a case one time as a defense attorney where a video enhancement of a tape and a shooting of a cop actually in a bar showed that it wasn't my client who was sitting in jail for 4 years waiting for a trial, that in fact he wasn't the person that did it. When I picked up the case, it had been going on for 4 years. I picked it up late in the game. Nobody ever even looked at the tape or even tried to enhance it. And you see this happen a lot where evidence isn't properly reviewed.
Yeah, and wow, your client sat there for 4 years, Bob, and he could have been cleared immediately had someone enhanced this video. That's why it's important that we talk about enhancing videos. That's why it's important that it's done. And you hear this expert, he talks about how pixels are ingrained in some of these cameras versus body cam and dash cam, and that's why you see a lot of dash cam footage look a lot clearer than body cam, because they're made to shoot wide and to shoot in a higher pixel because they need to catch things such as license plates, suspect movements inside vehicles. So enhancement of body cams becomes crucial in any case because those pixels aren't as high, so you need that enhancement.
Yeah, Vincent, I want to flip my hat from the defense side to the prosecution side. We investigated a police officer shooting fatality one time, and what the audience probably doesn't get is the tediousness when you have body cams and dash cams and multiple officers in coordinating it all, because it's a lot of data and it can be really misled or confusing if it's not done in a very logical fashion because there's so much coming in from so many different angles.
Yeah, and you have to synchronize all of that footage, right, to get the best picture, to get the totality of the evidence. So if you're looking to sync body cam with dash cam and then dash cam with the officer's body cam, it becomes very tedious and very difficult to do, but you have to do that to get the clear picture to tell you exactly what happened there on that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in the case that I was referring to, you know, the officer wasn't even able to explain how it all went down, to be honest with you. And it could have been taken by the detectives as kind of nefarious. But when you saw the body cam, you saw clearly in how convoluted a scenario was and how it would be that he wouldn't be able to recount. In 10 seconds or less, Vincent, have you ever been in a scene where you've seen something like that, where the video shows something you didn't even remember?
It's all the time. Even, you know, on a simple traffic stop, you go back and watch the video and it's like, oh, this did happen. I remember now. It happens, Bob, because everything's just like that. Absolutely.
Okay, Law and Crime Network. We're going to go to a break, and on the other end, come back with this fascinating case and Vincent Hill in Hotlanta. Okay, we are here with Vincent Hill. He's outside doing a yeoman's job here in Hotlanta. He's got cars going by. He's worried about some pigeons, as I understand it. But Vincent, let's pick up on that last point we were talking about, how the camera can show things that when the cop looks at it afterwards, there was this tunnel vision or they didn't see it. Very similar to what I've seen in the actual drills they do in training officers and tactical entries in buildings, where it's just fascinating. A guy could come out of a closet with a gun, hold it right to the cop's head, and afterwards the cop didn't even see the person just standing there. It's really fascinating.
Well, you have to keep in mind, Bob, everything in policing, when you're dealing with an escalated situation, it happens in a split second. Everything happens so fast. So it's almost impossible for the human mind to comprehend everything that's going on at that moment. So when I hear people say, oh, how can the cop not remember this? Well, listen, I've been in those situations where I go back later and say, oh, yes, this did happen. Oh, yeah, I did run around this corner. Oh, yes, this person did come from this way. Because everything's happening in a split second. When you look at Roy Oliver, look how much was going on there. He's inside this house talking to these teens. They hear shots. They see cars running. They see kids running on foot. There's a lot going on. So for someone to say, oh, you should be able to remember that, I say go and put yourself in an officer's shoes and see if you can do it yourself.
Yeah, and Vincent, I think that's a great point, and I think that a lot of people sometimes who aren't in court all the time are not fans of the Law and Crime Network, where they can get this gavel-to-gavel coverage.
They should be.
Exactly, that should be. Well, we have ours. They got to let their family and friends know, but they get very, very distracted by the idea. And I mean no disrespect by saying this, but in the courtroom, when it's all being broken down, the very points that you're making about all the frenetic activity that cops are confronting is one of the reasons, and I know this for a fact as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, as a trial expert, why juries many times aren't convicting cops in cases like this. It doesn't mean that the cop did was right. It doesn't mean that the person that was shot and killed was doing anything wrong. But with all that frenetic activity and all the law that gives discretion to officers, I think that that's one of the reasons you see this.
Hard to try an officer for murder. Let's be clear. An officer has a legal right to investigate a crime. In this case, they heard shots, so you can assume the officer had a reasonable belief that there was a firearm somewhere in that situation. He sees a vehicle fleeing. He assumes that could be the vehicle that was doing the shots, which we've seen in the past. So there's a lot to take in when you're trying to convict an officer of murder.
Yeah, agreed with that, but maybe not a lesser offense like manslaughter or reckless, because one thing in this case, a fact that's going to always be compelling to me as a prosecutor, and I would hammer it over and over and over again, is that this 15-year-old unarmed, straight-A student, good kid, was not the driver of the vehicle.
And to be clear, Bob, let me just say this. I mean, there was no signs that that vehicle had any weapons in it. They were just simply backing up and leaving the scene. So unless there was an imminent threat, i.e. you saw them going for a gun or there was a gun pointed at you, I honestly don't understand why shots were fired into that vehicle.
Absolutely. Well, okay, let's go to court and see where we're at with this forensic expert who enhanced this video audio body cam. Okay, there we go. We have the forensic expert that's up there that's talking about the enhancement of the video. I got Vincent Hill with us. He's down there in Hotlanta with his jacket off right now, doing a great job for us. And no two better people in my mind, Vincent, to break this case down, being both the cop and the prosecutor here. I want to just talk to you about something that I'm curious when we're talking about the enhancement of these video audio recordings. The producer had asked whether or not they've exonerated people, and in fact they have. And have you ever seen that in your career where the video showed, hey, what the cops wrote wasn't necessarily what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it in my career, and we've seen it recently in the news. I mean, when you look at some of these things that have happened across this country, again, I'm very pro-police, but, you know, sometimes the video evidence has shown something else. And again, does that mean the officer blatantly lied about what happened, or could he not remember exactly what happened? See, here's something a lot of people don't realize. After an officer is involved in a shooting, they have to meet with the shooting review board, our internal affairs, usually right after that happens. So that officer may be going off of memory, not necessarily what is on that videotape. So does that mean they lied, or are they going off memory? Again, everything happens so fast that it's hard to determine what you actually saw sometimes.
Well, Vincent, I have a couple of more questions that I would like to ask you. Right now, we're not at any critical testimony of this witness, and the producers, I think, like the back and forth that we have here because I think it's important. We're in the Roy Oliver case. You can't get more than this. A cop on trial for murder of a 15-year-old boy who was doing nothing wrong, was a passenger in a vehicle in a crazy scenario with a video. We're going to go to break. You're at the Law and Crime Network. Gavel-to-gavel coverage. On the other end, we'll come back with this fascinating case. Thank you. See you then. Law and Crime Network. We got Vincent Hill with us. He's out there in Hotlanta. We are in this case right now, Vincent. We pick up on a theme that we were talking about a little bit offline. A lot of frenetic activity, a lot happening, a lot of moving pieces. I have been wondering in this case, and we just heard a little testimony about it, whether there will be a connection between the broken window that his partner broke the window of that car and the other officer who is on trial right now shooting, thinking that maybe there were gunshots.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's very reasonable to believe. I mean, a lot of times broken glass can sound like a gunshot. One thing I do want to point out here, Bob, is it's very important in this case. We heard testimony from Gross, who said he did not perceive the car to be an imminent threat against his life, but it was actually Oliver, who you hear on the body cam saying he tried to run you over. And the thing that's important here is this is all based on what a reasonable officer believed from their vantage point. So maybe even though Gross did not assume that the car was a threat to him, maybe the vantage point that Oliver was at, he assumed that the car was trying to run him over. That's what's important here. That's what the jury's going to have to look into, consider into this case.
Excellent. I was going to actually address that very issue with you, but you got to it ahead of me, which is good because we need to get back into court and listen to some more testimony. Well, BB314 in the chat room, I don't have to talk about cooking when I'm with Vincent Hill because he is down there in Hotlanta, and I think he's doing enough cooking himself. How you doing out there, Vincent? Okay, listen, always love our chatters, but this case, this police interview, I have to say, I've been doing homicide for close to 30 years now on both sides of the equation, mainly as a prosecutor, but it has got to be one of the most peculiar, odd, bizarre, and disingenuous levels of reactions. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can only be topped by one other police interview that I've seen, and that's Jodi Arias. We're all familiar with that case where she, too, blamed the victim, Travis, in that case. But listen, Bob, you know, Shayna's trying to sit here and say it was self-defense, but let's be clear. Her boyfriend at the time was shot 6 times, 1 in the face. We heard testimony from the medical examiner that talked about that head wound and the switching that he was doing there on the floor while she stood over him to make sure he was dead, saying he had a severe brain injury. So how she's claiming self-defense and making herself to be this victim is beyond me. Now, let's be clear. Does domestic violence occur? Yes, absolutely. I've seen enough of it in my police career, so I'm not taking that away. But to shoot someone 6 times, once in the face where he gets a brain injury, how do you plead self-defense to that?
Well, that's a very good piece of forensic analysis, but we also wrap that around the testimony that's come out so far about these constant text messages, the father getting involved and trying to leave him alone, him speaking to the secretary in the office, this copious amount of data. Listen, we have Vincent Hill. Unfortunately, he has got to go away. He's done a great job analyzing for us. Thank you, Vincent, for your time. And we are going to come. Yeah, always a pleasure. We're going to be coming back with Doris West, who's going to dispute the version the defendant gave about there being an argument and a fight. And certainly this is going to be a major prosecution witness.